So in the upcoming 0.4 Fate of the Vol patch for Path of Exile 2, there are 2 things happening to uniques. Well, 3 really. We're getting new ones, but besides that, they're buffing other uniques. And then the more interesting one here that we're going to talk about for the moment is they are getting an additional mechanic that's not currently in the game, in which Vol uniques, and if you don't know what a Vol unique is, I'll put a link down below. This is a Reddit post kind of linking to what the ones that are Vol unique, but they're basically uniques that are Vol themed or drop from like Vol bosses, etc. So there are a list of these, and what it actually does is there's a new reward from the new like explore the tempo type of mechanic here, and this, I'll just let this play for a moment and I'll explain it.
Modifying in unpredictable ways.
So this right here is a Vol unique he's going to put in, and what it's going to do and what he's going to explain is it's going to take one of the 4 stat lines, remove it, and replace it with a different predetermined outcome that they have lined up. So it's not going to just give like a random stat to one of these. It's actually they handwritten for each one of these uniques a certain type of modifier that could go there, and here's an example of one.
If the mods of this unique will be removed and replaced with another random mod.
There we go, it crunches it down. And now you can see here what it did is it replaced the 9.9 life with regenerates 0.9% of maximum life per second while surrounded. Now this is interesting because there are some Vol uniques that have very bad downsides, but if they did not have them, would be absolutely insane. And they said in the Ziggy D Q&A that any of these stat lines could be affected. So they could have removed the attribute and added something, could remove the life or the fewer surrounded, etc. So it is, from my understanding, Ziggy D Q&A, Mark mentioned that they can be any of these stat lines can actually be removed. Now, one of the ones that kind of comes to mind when they're talking about this is Mask of the Stitch Demon. Now this item here is an energy shield based item. You can see that's 112 to 132 ES there, and it gives you life per second, 0.05 life per second per maximum energy shield. Now when you look at this, you might think, well, this seems actually terrible, and you would be right, because you have the downside of you cannot have energy shield. So why would you want this item? It's an ES based item. Energy shield is a huge portion of defenses, and then you're going to have to stack energy shield literally anyway in order to get life regen. Pretty bad, right? But if we could remove this stat line, this item might be quite interesting, because now we're regenerating life based upon maximum energy shield, but we still get energy shield. But there's one other reason this would be interesting. There is this node in the game called Zealot's Oath, and what this does is excess life recovery from regeneration is applied to energy shield, but your energy shield does not recharge. So if I am capped out on life, my life regeneration that I am gaining is now directly regenerating my energy shield. I don't have to rely on recharge, and recharge is kind of the downside on energy shield. You can have a lot of energy shield, but you get hit and you gotta wait for the downtime of not being hit in order to regenerate it. This is part of the reason Grimfeast was so good back before they removed its functionality from the game. Beside the fact that overflow and you literally got double ES, which was busted, you also could continually regenerate huge chunks of energy shield. It's also why Ghost Shroud is so good currently in the game as well. You're giving these Ghost Shrouds, which are regenerating your energy shield based upon your evasion, and so that way you can kind of build a lot of energy shield, but still get like fast replenishing of it. So what if we could stack energy shield, but negate the downside of it entirely, where that's where this helmet comes into play. You remove the cannot have energy shield with this new Vow-born type of mechanic, and now we are regenerating energy shield instead of life using the new Zealot's Oath. And you can have a ton of energy shield, so if you had 15,000 energy shield, for instance, you are now regenerating 750 energy shield per second. Now, the problem is, as we go through these uniques, for all we know, they could determine that, this is too strong. Maybe they don't let you remove this one in particular. It says, cannot have energy shield, but instead all energy shield goes to bonus life. Or, they could have some kind of modifier that kind of keeps that in it. Or it could do something similar to constricting command, and it could just remove this and instead give you like regenerating percentage. We don't really know, but this is definitely one that sticks out to me. Here's another obvious one people are talking about. Now, how this works is you gain 1 to 3 random charges, like power charge, endurance charge, frenzy charge, when you reach maximum rage. Your maximum rage is increased or reduced depending upon your row here, maximum 10, maximum rage, and lose all rage on reaching maximum rage. So the way this actually works is you hit 30 rage, you lose it, you gain your random charge. However, if you could remove this downside at all and you don't lose your maximum rage, then what this means is this would interact very well with the shaman. How the shaman works is all your skills, which are not default attacks, cost 5 rage to lose. So you're basically using your ability, whatever ability, bear, wyvern, you know, whatever you're using. Maybe you're using spells or something like that. You're losing 5 rage and you're immediately like regenerating your rage again because you have your inherent rage generation built into the character. You have rage on hit, etc., and you're regaining those charges. This would effectively basically generate you infinite charges. This would be one way to get around one of the most annoying parts about a lot of builds, which is constant generation of charges. Now, this one isn't actually a Vol unique. This is just a buff that's happening in the patch in relation to Whispering Ice. This is the Whispering Ice. It was one of the items that was added in with the Dream Palmer and the Last Lament, which is back in the mid-game update patch of 0.2. Pretty cool item. Didn't really see a lot of play, but it does have something on here which gives you 20 to 30% elemental exposure on hit with it. Now, what's interesting in the patch here is this was actually buffed to 50 to 60% element exposure on hit, which is significant. So I feel like the Whispering Ice would be a very easy item just to add in your offhand. And elemental exposure applies all of the exposure, you know, cold, lightning, fire, doesn't matter. So no matter, you know, what build you're actually using, you could literally just offhand this in order to get like a, you know, 60% elemental exposure just for tapping them once. So I thought this seemed pretty good. Now, Invictus is an item that drops from Arbiter. I've been vocal about being bummed out about this item because it used to see a lot of play and be quite good. And then they got nerfed and basically nobody used it because the stats are all dog shit. Well, it got buffed again, and I think it's going to be actually usable as sort of a before Ultra in-game type of piece in which you just kind of need a stat stick type of situation. So if you look at this here, now it gives you 8 to 10% all res per socket. You can get up to 60 life per socket, up to 13 chaos per socket, 60 mana per socket. So you could use this with a 5-socket version of this, and you could effectively get yourself 50% all res. You could get 300 flat max life, and you could get yourself a pretty chunky, 65% chaos res here as well, just all from one item. Still going to be replaced by like a better item later, as you know, just reses and life isn't really, you know, that insane. You're going to look for other stats, but for now, it should be at least significantly better than it was previously. This right here is one of my more favorite buffs to the game. So Cloak of Flame here is currently 40% of physical damage taken as fire, but this is actually getting changed once again in the patch notes here, and it's getting a pretty nice buff. We go to Cloak of Flame here. So look here, all right? This is getting 30 to 50 max ES, now has this here, but this right here is the one that actually matters. 50% of physical damage taken as fire, so this is effectively a 25% buff to this stat line, and you can corrupt an item, I believe, up to 22% in either direction, which means you actually end up looking at up to 61% of physical damage is taken as fire with a really good corrupted version of this. So this item plus, high fire res, high max fire res actually helps mitigate a good chunk of your physical damage. This was seeing some play before, but then it kind of, with the meta shifting got, relegated to not really being used that much. It saw some play originally, but now I think it's actually going to be used more. And here's one change that basically guts an entire build, and people will probably be sad to see. The Last Lament unique crossbow now only prevents the final loaded bolt from being consumed if the character actually sacrifices life. I am surprised about this one. Considering on their official channel, they actually did a showcase with this exact interaction. I remember when we were seeing the patch notes back in the day of the Witch being released, and we saw that ascendancy. I remember thinking, this Last Lament mechanic actually makes this item like somewhat usable, as people weren't really using it. And then there's a really nice build that was made that was then showcased here on their official channel, and you can see they're literally highlighting this themselves, and this was by Sozaz, to make sure that we gave a shout to the correct person here. But they nerfed this interaction, and how this actually worked was eternal life made where your life can't be sacrificed, and the Last Lament crossbow sacrifices life. And then they actually changed galvanic shards to be like basically a 1 bolt in the clip shotgun effect. And so they actually buffed the damage of that, so people were just running the Last Lament Galvanic Shards, where basically you have infinite ammo because your life can't be changed and you're sacrificing life. But this patch note here guts this interaction entirely. So I don't really think people are going to be using, the Last Lament anymore. It actually got quite expensive because of this one build and this one niche use and interaction, and because of that, it was actually kind of cool if you got one, especially if you got one that was exceptional drop or something like that. It actually could be a pretty good payout as sort of a niche, unique item, but this has now been gutted. Okay, so one more honorable mention here, which is the Vertex equipment and skill gems have 50% reduced attribute requirements. So this has been changed to now either have 100% reduced attribute requirements from like equipment, items you're wearing, or skill gems have 100% reduced requirement. So the obvious case use for this one would be like Giant's Blood. You wear this and you take Giant's Blood, and now you don't have to worry about the attribute requirement at all, which makes you think like, well, why would I ever use the Bringer of Rain, which is basically Giant's Blood, but now I literally can't even wear a body armor? Well, they actually changed this where now it actually drops with 4 socket spots for the helmet as well, which is pretty interesting. I suppose with Exceptional, that would make it 5. But there's also like this item here, which requires 200 int to use. The other stats aren't very great, but I'm sure some people can make this use, or maybe you want to use Blink and you're an all-strength build or something, you don't have enough int, or maybe you want to do Tame Beast, but you have no dex. Like, there will be case uses for this. It's also a vol item, so maybe this ends up being one of the things where when you vol it and you hit that stat line, it becomes like you can use both gems and equipment. We don't know what they're really going to do with that stat line, but it is one of the more interesting ones. Okay, one more. The Anvil here is actually giving a buff as well. It currently is 3 to 5% maximum block chance, but if you actually look at the Anvil here, now it goes to 5 to 10% maximum block chance. If you didn't know, they changed block chance down to the maximum was 50% before you actually modify it on tree, but with the Anvil now that's 60% with just one item. There's another 5% maximum block chance you can get just right here, 2, and +1, which puts you to 65 fairly easily. And if you want to go all the way up here, you can get to 69, nice percentage block chance. And then the Svalinn is getting buffed as well, in which it can now roll up to 0% of damage taken from block hits. Basically means that when you get one of these, you're going to divine this down to you get 0%. So you're not taking any damage from block hits. And now your block chance is lucky. So the whole downside of this can actually be negated entirely. So I believe if you had 69% chance with the previously mentioned with Svalinn, that basically gives you a pseudo 84% chance to block if my math is correct. Anyway, the more I dig into the unique item changes and we start looking through like the patch notes, and they just added more additional patch notes actually as of this morning, the more that I realize like there's a lot of really good unique buff changes in this patch, which I love to see, because one of the most common complaints I read in the comments and the live streams, etc., is that people think a lot of the uniques are unimpactful, and it looks like they're attempting to address that. I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of good uniques on the list. This isn't every single one of them, so put your favorite one down in the comments below, and I'll look at your recommendations today on the live stream. That's about it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video tomorrow.